Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bridging the Gap, the podcast where we explore the intersection of chronic illness, mental health, and human connection. I'm your host, Carina Schroedel. In our first episode, we just had an introduction to the relationship between chronic illness and mental health and why these two areas of healthcare can no longer be viewed separately. Today, I want to explore something that often goes unrecognized, even by healthcare professionals. When people hear the word grief, they often think about the loss of a loved one. But grief is so much bigger than that. For individuals living with chronic illness, grief becomes kind of like an ongoing companion. It can show up after the diagnosis, after the loss of independence, after changes in relationships, employment, finances, or even after just realizing life is not going to look like the way it once did. So today we're talking about the grief no one talks about, and that's the grief of chronic illness, the loss of identity, and the process of rebuilding a meaningful life. And we'll just start with, what is chronic illness grief? When most people think of grief, they imagine a single event. Something happens, a loss occurs, the grieving process begins, but chronic illness is different. The losses happen repeatedly. Someone may lose their ability to work. Then they lose their financial security. Then they lose activities they once enjoyed. They lose relationships that can no longer survive the stress of the illness. They lose confidence in their own body. The grieving process it's just not linear because losses are not singular. They're ongoing. Many individuals describe feeling like they're constantly adapting to this new reality. Just when they begin to adjust, here comes another symptom emerges, another diagnosis appears, or another limitation develops. And this is going to create what researchers often describe as chronic sorrow. And that's a reoccurring experience of grief that resurfaces throughout the illness journey. Many people experience, to start out with, just a loss of identity. One of the most profound losses they may experience is a loss of identity. Whenever we think about it, many people define ourselves. We define ourselves by what we do. Maybe you're a parent, a professional, an athlete, a caregiver, a student, a provider, a helper. But what happens when chronic illness changes your ability to fulfill those roles? Many people begin asking questions such as, who am I if I can't work the way I used to? Who am I if I need help from others? Who am I if my body no longer functions the way it's supposed to? Who am I if my future looks different than what I planned? These are not superficial questions. They are deeply existential questions. They strike at the core of how we understand ourselves. And unfortunately, many healthcare systems focus on exclusively symptom management while overlooking the emotional impact of these identity shifts. So we have this mental impact. It's important to understand that sadness, frustration, anger, and grief, they're not signs of weakness. These are normal human responses to significant life changes. Some examples of things someone with chronic illness may experience is anxiety about the future, depression related to loss and isolation, fear of disease progression, feelings of guilt of burdening others, social withdrawal, increased stress and emotional exhaustion. And what makes this especially challenging is that symptoms of chronic illness and symptoms of mental health conditions often overlap. So we're also going to have fatigue, difficulty concentrating, changes in sleep, reduced motivation, physical pain. And because of this overlap, emotional struggles can easily be overlooked. We also have what we call invisible illness and validation. So another layer of grief involves the invisibility. Many chronic illnesses are not immediately visible to others. A person may look healthy while experiencing tremendous pain, fatigue, neurological symptoms, or cognitive challenges. So because the illness isn't visible, people often hear comments like, well, you don't look sick, or you seemed fine yesterday. Maybe you're just stressed. Have you tried exercising more? And these comments they may be well-intentioned, but they're very invalidating. And over time, individuals may begin questioning their own experiences. They may stop sharing what they're going through. They may feel increasingly isolated. So validation matters. Being believed matters, and feeling seen matters. The good news is that grief is not the end of the story. While chronic illness may change a person's life, it does not eliminate their worth, purpose, or ability to find meaning. One of the most powerful shifts occurs when we begin moving from the question, how do I get my old life back, to how do I build a meaningful life where I am now? That doesn't mean giving up. It's about adapting. It means recognizing identity is bigger than productivity. Identity is bigger than physical ability. And identity is bigger than a diagnosis. Many of us discover strengths we never even knew we possessed. Try to think about things like resilience, compassion, advocacy, creativity, spiritual growth, deeper relationships, a stronger sense of purpose. These discoveries don't erase the losses, but they can coexist with them. A few strategies I have here for coping is if you or a loved one are navigating chronic stress, some approaches that may help is first, just allow yourself permission to grieve. You don't have to minimize your losses. Seek supportive relationships. This may be support groups, therapy, family, friends, maybe online communities. Connection really matters. And third, this one's very important. Practice self-compassion. Your worth is not determined by productivity. Focus on values rather than limitations. Ask yourself, what matters most to me? How can I continue living in alignment with those values, even if my circumstances have changed? And celebrate small victories. Healing is not always measured by symptom reduction. Sometimes healing means adapting, preserving, and continuing to move forward despite challenges. As this podcast grows, we'll begin bringing in guests who can share their lived experience, professional expertise, and personal journeys related to chronic illness and mental health. We're going to hear from individuals living with chronic conditions, caregivers, healthcare professionals, therapists, advocates, and others working to bridge the gap that exists within our healthcare system. And my hope is just that these conversations help us get a greater understanding, some compassion, and some connection. Thank you for joining me in episode 2 of Bridging the Gap. If today's session resonated with you, I encourage you to share this episode with someone who may benefit from hearing it. And let's remember, you are more than your diagnosis. You are more than your symptoms. And even when life changes unexpectedly, your story still matters. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of others, This is Carina Schroedel, and you've been listening to Bridging the Gap.